Mr. President, thank you very much. I come to speak on the support for the Shaheen-Portman bill, otherwise known as the Energy Savings and Industrial Competitiveness Act, otherwise known, as I like to put it, it saves money, saves energy. Keep it simple. And, you know, it comes at an important time, and it's no surprise. As someone from Alaska, I care about oil and gas issues. I care about energy issues, energy efficiency, and this is a bill that is important to talk about, but also hopefully pass it and move it to the House, and hopefully they'll take it up. Conservation makes sense, saves money, makes people more comfortable in their homes and workplaces, and it also is good for the economy and the environment. Particularly important to Alaska. When you think about Alaska's per capita energy costs, which are the highest in the nation, we have long and cold winters and limited infrastructure in rural parts of the state, so we spend more than anywhere else. We have the most to gain from energy efficiency improvements, and the payoff is faster than any other place. In Alaska, energy costs affect every aspect of life. Energy costs are driving people away from their traditional homes in rural Alaska. It's getting too expensive to heat even the smallest of the homes. The cost of fuel to run your boat or snow machine for subsistence hunting and fishing is sky high. Fairbanks, Alaska, is another example. Filling up your fuel tank to heat your home could easily cost you $1,900, and that will only last maybe half of the winter. Electric heat isn't much better. Right now in Fairbanks, it's costing 19 cents a kilowatt. Not a good alternative to heat your home. When you bundle it together, it puts a lot of pressure on the pocketbook. That's why I fought to get a permit to restart the Healy coal plant and made sure existing coal plant at the University of Alaska Fairbanks are exempt from the EPA regulation. We need to stabilize prices while making investments into energy efficiency. Otherwise, communities like Fairbanks become unaffordable to live in. For schools in Alaska, 75% of the energy cost goes into the space heating. Money that they spend on heating and electricity is money they cannot spend in the classroom, making sure we have the best education for our young people. As an example, the government of state of Alaska alone spends $642 million a year on energy. That's 1/10 of the state's operating budget. Our state provides energy to the rest of the nation, yet our residents can't afford to live where they want to live, where in many cases their families have lived for generations. Energy efficiency can have an immediate and profound effect on the lives of people in these communities. The Shaheen-Portman bill is deficit neutral. It is estimated to save consumers $60 billion between 2014 and 2030 and create nearly 160,000 jobs by 2030. And let me say, having those jobs added to the economy just after coming off this last month with almost 280,000 jobs in the private sector, this is a good sign to add more jobs to our economy. You know, I filed an amendment to provide $5,000 tax credit toward the purchase of efficient home heating and cooling appliances for families living in very high energy states. Examples: converting home for expensive heating fuel to cleaner, more efficient natural gas, or clean burning wood stoves, even replacing old appliances with newer and more efficient ones can cut back on electric use and lower energy bills. For example, an Energy Star certified refrigerator must use at least 20% less energy than the current standard and 40% less energy than the standard from 2001. Like many of my colleagues, the biggest disappointment is that the Senate takes so long to deal with a very modest bill. And let's be honest, while all good policy, this is a very modest piece of legislation. Congress has passed major energy legislation since 2007. The energy landscape has radically changed since then. Cost of many renewables has come down dramatically. Solar, wind, hydro, marine energy, geothermal, biomass have all grown across this country. However, rational energy policy for our nation needs to include both renewable and non-renewable energy, not to pit them against each other. Directional drilling, hydraulic fracturing have changed traditional energy production landscape too. Production is way up. The U.S. traditionally a third largest producer of crude after Saudi Arabia and Russia. The final numbers aren't in yet for 2013, but it looks like we're about to be number one or very close to it. Yet, we're still relying on too much foreign oil from U.S. U.S. consuming about 19 billion barrels of oil per day. All told, about 13 million barrels per day of our demand is supplied by U.S. products, crude, natural gas liquids, and ethanol. Still leaves us another 5 to 6 million barrels per day from other countries, many of whom don't like us very much. And that's where Alaska comes in. We can play a significant role providing U.S. production and creating some good jobs that are potentially huge. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline delivers about 550,000 barrels a day, just over 10% of the domestic oil production. That's down from a peak of 2 million barrels a day 25 years ago. But there's a lot more oil and gas to go after. Producers of oil and gas produce incredibly high-paying jobs. $117,000 average sector wages in Alaska, and we can produce more. As we look at the 2012 and what's the potential as it started in the Arctic and development of exploration in the Chukchi and Beaufort wells over 20 years ago. The first time that we started doing exploration wells was in 2012, after 20 years of stagnant growth. We're making strides, a return back for more exploration in 2015. Alaska can ensure our energy security and economic prosperity through development of our domestic resources, reducing our reliance on foreign oil. And I think our picture here shows it very clearly, the volume of capacity in Alaska and where we fit in the world. And this is just of what we know about. And if you look, and we add into there Cook Inlet, and let me give you kind of the sense of the potential. Chukchi oil, 15.4 billion barrels of oil, 77 trillion cubic feet. Beaufort oil, this is both in the Arctic, 8.2 billion barrels of oil. Gas, 28 trillion cubic. NPRA oil, 1 billion barrels of oil. And I will tell you about the issue of the NPRA, which is the National Petroleum Reserve. This area has only slight exploration over the years. Now we're into development. The first well is now being moving forward. I was very pleased in one of my first acts working here and working with the administration, getting them to see the light of day, solving a problem of the first issue of the CD5. Now we have production. That first well, one development, 17,000 barrels a day. The second one, which is called GMT2 or GMT1, right next door will be another 30 or 40,000 barrels a day of oil. And of course, ANWR, which we estimate around 10 plus billion barrels of oil. Again, Alaska is a storehouse of energy, not only oil and gas, but many others. But this point I want to make is oil and gas, through a study that was done in Alaska, can produce around 54,000 jobs, over 50 years of production in the Arctic. And if you look at it from local and state and government revenues over the 50 years, well over $100 billion, plus another $150 billion in payroll. Another issue which is important to Alaska, but also to this country, is the liquefied natural gas export. A project can produce many jobs and create huge economic opportunity throughout this country. It's projected a project that we want to move gas off the North Slope right down and then distribute it around the world. We estimate that project will be about $65 billion for development. An 800-mile pipeline, liquefaction plant, and marine terminal. The largest, most expensive energy project in North America. Up to 15,000 design and construction jobs, up to 1,000 jobs during operation. At full, the LNG export capacity of 2.5 billion cubic feet a day of natural gas sales to overseas buyers can total more than $12 billion a year. The steel pipe alone to construct that pipeline of 800 miles, 42 inches in diameter, almost an inch thick, is such a big order that it would take one plant, a single pipe mill, for 2 years producing that. This would only add to the important role of oil and gas industry is already playing in the national economy. 9% of all the jobs in 2011 came from the oil and gas sector, 37,000 direct jobs created nationwide. As I said earlier, they're good paying jobs. But let me say 2 or 3 more points, then I'll close, Mr. President. And that is, as I talk about oil and gas for Alaska, and it's an important part of our economy, important part for this whole energy system that we have here in this country. We have huge amounts of it. We're happy that the Arctic is moving forward. Again, a project that was stalled for many, many years, now moving the right direction. NPRA, same thing, that was stalled out for many years, now again moving in the right direction. But Alaska is also unique in many ways, as this bill talks about energy conservation and what we can do to preserve the capacity of our energy use. Alaska, by 2025, will be 50% renewable energy internal consumption. But we also are very embracing everywhere we can on conservation. I can just tell you from my own experience, not only from my own home to commercial buildings that I operate, we made those more energy efficient using new boiler systems that are 98% more efficient. The net result is we're saving the tenants lots of money every year. New energy efficient windows and other elements have made those buildings, again, more efficient, saving their money and saving and allowing us to put more money back into the complexes. Mr. Chairman, even though this isn't a comprehensive bill, it is a piece of legislation that gets us down the road to do some energy policy in this country. And I know, Mr. President, even though you live on the East Coast and I live, of course, in Alaska, we may be far apart by thousands of miles, but the end result is we still have the same issues. Consumers want more efficient facilities, more efficient buildings, lower the cost, save them money, and give them more energy that they can do new development, new economic development. That's what this bill does in many ways. But along with it, by creating conservation and creating more energy efficient legislation like this, we're creating jobs just by that act. And I think it's important that we look at this bill from a broad perspective and do what we can to make ourselves more dependent on our own energy sources. May they be oil and gas, may they be energy efficient renewable energy or energy efficient projects. The more we're dependent on our own resources or create less dependence on foreign oil, the better off we're going to be from a national security perspective and better off we're going to be from an economic perspective. I'm just going to leave you with one statistic. Because of all the work of becoming more dependent on our own energy sources, becoming more energy efficient, just this last year, on an annual basis, we are sending $100 billion less overseas to foreign countries for oil, because we're doing it more here and we're becoming more efficient. Mr. President, I appreciate the moment to come down to the floor to talk about, of course, I would never leave a moment, no matter what the subject matter is. If you're talking about energy, I'm going to talk about Alaska oil and gas, but also how it partners with energy efficiency issues, conservation, renewable energy. There's none that pits each other. It's all about the projects together and working together. Mr. President, I thank you for the moment to be on the floor, and I take this time to yield the floor or note the absence of quorum.